in, guys? We're the Football Fanatics here. I'm your host, Eric Wheeler, here with James Chason and Ryan Buck. Today we're going to be going over the NFC East kind of division and review. We're going to be going over their last season. We're just kind of going to give you like how we felt their seasons went, kind of what they can do to improve for next season. We're just going to get actually right into it, and I'm going to start with the worst team in that division, the Giants. How do you guys feel their season went?
You can go ahead. All right. In my opinion, it was a pretty terrible season. They started off with 2 losses, and that trend kind of continued throughout the year. Really bad play all around. Like, there wasn't one spot that shined and one that didn't. They were just terrible on both sides of the ball. They have a lot of needs coming up in this draft and free agency, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of jotted down some notes here. For the Giants, I mean, they've got $31 million in cap currently. This is a team that obviously won 5-11, but at the end of the year, if they won a couple games and some things played out their way, they were still in the talks of being a playoff team. And again, it sounds weird to say for a 5-11 team, but there's definitely things they need to improve on. And for me, when I heard that they wanted to start Eli Manning next year, I was like, this is like them taking another step back. I'm like, This team needs to move on. I mean, we're not going to really get into the draft that much, but maybe if you guys want to talk about it, I mean, they should draft Dwayne Haskins. I think that's got to be something they've got to do this offseason. Even if they're still, thrilled with what Eli can give them, you can at least have Dwayne Haskins sitting behind him and learning from him. Did you guys want to talk about that a little bit or what?
Just to add a note, there's a report that came out that Nick Foles is actually interested in playing in New York for the Giants.
That's interesting.
Yeah, the only way I see that happening, though, is that they'd have to cut Eli, which they are very against right now.
Right.
So they'd have to cut Eli to bring Foles in and then they'd probably draft Dwayne Haskins and have Haskins behind Foles. I don't see it happening. I think they're going to draft Haskins and have him sit behind Eli. There's no reason to cut Eli. I mean, I don't like Eli. I didn't think he played well this season. I thought he was a lot of the problem. Also, their O-line was really bad. Really, the only shining parts of this whole team was Saquon and Odell, really.
I thought a lot of Eli's stats were inflated. I think if you look at his stats, you're going to think he did better than he actually was. I mean, in a game against the Cowboys, a team that had already made the playoffs, they were still trying against them, and Eli was like, okay, I can put up some big stats against a lot of bench players on their defense that week, and they still lost.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like he can't pull out the big win for them, I thought a lot of his stats this year were just inflated.
He was definitely a garbage man this year. He would be bad for most of the game, and then during garbage time, when the game was basically over, his stats would inflate. But again, I want to go back to probably the shining part of this team, which was Saquon, their second overall pick from a year ago. He played extremely good this year. He was fantastic for the team.
Offensive Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, he showed why he was the second pick in the draft. Although I still think that they probably should have traded back and taken like an O-lineman or something like that and built a little more because this team does have a lot of needs. Saquon was still an amazing pick. I can't hate on it, but that brings me into my next thing. Their O-line is terrible.
Right.
It is absolutely awful, and they need to address this in free agency and through the draft. I do think with their first pick they take Haskins, but after that, O-line needs to be a huge part of this team's draft.
There's some intriguing offensive linemen in this free agency. They got Roger Saffold, they got Juwan James, they've got who else? Matt Paradise, Darrell Williams. So they've got some intriguing offensive linemen in free agency, and again, they've got $31 million in cap. And real quick, if they cut guys like Janoris Jenkins, who's really been a liability for them the last couple of years, and he had that off-season issue last year, or off-field issue, I mean, with something with their basement.
There's a body.
Found.
It was like his brother or something like that.
Right. If they cut him, that's getting rid of $14.7 million in cap, and no dead cap there as well. So that can get them even higher. And also, just another intriguing thing, Olivier Vernon. I mean, again, he was a Pro Bowler last year, but he still has concerns with him. He's getting up there in age as well. Another player with no dead cap. You cut him, you get rid of $19.5 million in cap.
And that's huge. I want to go back to the Janoris Jenkins thing. If you cut him, their corners are really bad. They traded Eli Apple to the Saints, and then Janoris Jenkins looked like a shell of himself this year.
Yeah.
Their corners were really bad this year. That's another position. Again, this team has a lot of needs, and corners is definitely one of those positions. And again, Landon Collins is a free agent this year. So if you lose Landon Collins, which I'm kind of on the fence about, because they do have a lot of cap, so they can re-sign him, but they've also mentioned that they want to franchise tag him. He says he doesn't want to play on a franchise tag. So I'm up in the air if they'll lose Landon Collins or not. But this secondary is shaky. The only person I like in this secondary right now, other than Landon Collins, is the strong safety Mike Thomas. he looked very good towards the end of the season. So they have a lot of holes on their defensive side. Their O-line has a lot of holes. I will say Sterling Shepard actually looked decent this year.
Yeah.
With Odell and Saquon, I guess he was another part of that offense looked pretty good. Evan Ingram was non-existent.
Injuries, though.
I think it was more of a scheme thing too.
And he did deal with injuries as well.
Shermer likes a tight end that can really block, and Evan Ingram is not known for that.
That's why you saw Brett Ellison.
Red Ellison, yeah.
You saw him play a lot because he is very good at blocking. Right. And trust me, I had Evan Ingram for a little while in fantasy. I knew the pain of watching Evan Ingram just not play. So
another thing, I mean, back to Sterling Shepard. I mean, can he contribute as a number one wide receiver? I mean, they've been talking about Odell maybe being possibly on the trade block. I mean, can Sterling Shepard take that number one receiver role? I mean,
I think so.
For me, I think he could. I believe if you trade Odell, you better be getting a first and either a second this year or next year, or a first or two first, a first this year and a first next year for him, because he is still a top 5, top 10 talent at his position, mostly top 5. I kind of believe they do trade him though. There's a lot of reports coming out, and even an analyst very close to the Giants said there's a real possibility he gets traded. So, but I agree. I think Sterling Shepard could take over that number one role. I believe if they do trade him though, they draft a wide receiver, and they probably pick up like an Adam Humphries through the draft or through free agency too.
If I'm the Giants, I'd rather trade Odell at this point. I think they should have even done it last year. Again, he's one of the best wide receivers in the league, top 10 definitely. But he's a guy that a lot of off-field concerns, and he's a guy like, you don't hear about Sterling Shepard like being any problem for the team. You always hear about Odell Beckham in the news, and he's just someone, again, if I could trade him and get value for him, again, if I'm a team, I'm definitely giving up somewhat value for him over Antonio Brown. So
yeah.
And it's not like Odell's the problem with this team. It's that this team has so many pieces missing that trading him and getting draft capital would probably be the best thing for this team. Because for what I believe they could get out of this, which would probably be like 2 to 3 picks, very high picks in that would help this team in the long run much more than I believe Odell can. Mostly if they use those picks and pick right. Look what the Colts did last year, trading down with their picks.
Right.
That team was a whole different team this year. They also got Andrew Luck back. That was huge, but those picks were huge for them.
2 stars.
Exactly. Leonard was Defensive Rookie of the Year, and their guard basically solidified that line. So, for me, I do believe it's time to trade him. I know a lot of Giants fans aren't going to like to hear that because everybody loves him, and honestly, he is a fan favorite, and I get why. But I believe if you could get the picks for him, you do it.
Yeah, let's just say you get a first and a second. You could be looking at Dwayne Haskins, a wide receiver like A.J. Brown, D.K. Metcalf, and then a cornerback like Trayvon Mullins, or even an offensive lineman, Cody Core, Dalton Reiser. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think the wide receiver position is necessarily a problem for the Giants, especially. And I mean, again, if you do trade Odell, not great free agents, are for wide receivers anyways.
Cole Beasley,
but
Adam Humphries, Deshaun Jackson, those types.
And again, if I'm the Giants, low-key signing, maybe on like a minimum deal, I thought Cody Latimer did decent for them this season. If you can get him back on a 1-year, $1 million contract type thing, he can put up some good stats for you. But
I do believe that if you could grab a first and second, like James just said, for Odell, you do it, because you get Haskins, your QB of the future. Then you go and grab like a N'Keal Harry, a DK Metcalf, something like that. You get a wide receiver, pair him up with Sterling Shepard. Then maybe you get one out of free agency like an Adam Humphries. Then you have Sterling Shepard, DK Metcalf, and Adam Humphries. That's a good wide receiving core. Then with that second, you can land your O tackle or a cornerback. That's 3 pieces you just added there, plus 1 through free agency, all for the price of 1 guy.
Yeah.
Plus you're clearing up cap space because you just traded Odell's massive contract.
Yeah.
I mean, believe it or not, I think everyone talks about running backs and how you can draft them in the 5th round and still get production. But I think wide receivers are definitely turning out to be that way in today's league with how much passing there is nowadays. You can really find receivers in late rounds, just like you can running backs, and get similar production as someone who you can find in the 1st round nowadays.
Look at Keenan Allen was a 3rd. Antonio Brown was, a 6th?
And then look at Laquan Treadwell, 1st round guy. I mean, he really hasn't panned out at all.
It's just you got to find those diamonds in the rough. And
right.
If the Giants draft well enough with those picks, You could have him. But
Tyrell Williams undrafted.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Dontrell Emmett, even, he was a decent guy for the Colts this year.
Right, Adam Thielen too,
was undrafted, yeah.
So, but that's it for the Giants. We'll move on to the next team. And this team started out very well and then was hit with the massive injury bug. We're going to go on to the Redskins. They went 7-9. And one of the biggest reasons they went 7-9 was because, I don't know why, but they just kept getting injured. They started the season with Geis, one of their probably best prospects coming up. Everybody in fantasy was raving about him.
Yeah, and he looks promising.
Exactly. He tore his ACL, right?
ACL, yeah.
Tore his ACL, and then it just continued. And the biggest one, I would say, lost this season was Alex Smith when he broke his leg. And that now leaves you with a huge hole for this upcoming season because of all the surgeries, because of the infections. So I'm going to ask you guys, how do you think the Redskins season went?
It's very disappointing, but I think there's kind of like a bright spot. I mean, obviously, starting off 6-3 and finishing 7-9, that's tough after losing your quarterback. But I mean, you look at before that 6-3, they were playing very well. Their only losses came against playoff teams. So actually, no, two playoff teams. One was the Falcons. But yeah, like Eric mentioned, the defining game of their season was that Texans game. That was a very close game, very winnable game, and they ended up losing because they lost their quarterback. This team's not far off from contention, even if they don't get Smith back. I really think Nick Foles would be a great fit here. He said he probably wants to stay in the division, either Washington or the Giants. If they get another receiver to pair with Doxson, I think they'd be really good. I love their running backs, Chris Thompson and Darius Geis. That could be one hell of a duo. So.
Yeah, so for me, when we were talking about the Giants, I was talking about getting rid of Janoris Jenkins and Olivia Verne, some of the older guys. For the Redskins, I think they've got a plethora of young talent. I'm bringing in vets at this point. Guys, you were 7-9. I mean, again, James said it, you were 6-3. It was when your quarterback went down for the Redskins, really, when this team fell apart. For this team, you got to bring in vets, but not only vets, you got to bring in depth, okay? Because this team was, I think, 30th last year in terms of healthiness. Like, they had
28 on IR.
Right, so I think they might have been even last for like the most injuries or whatever.
Yeah.
So if you can get vets, if you can get depth on this team, again, you're really not far off these things. So, for me, I'm really getting guys like, and you said bring in Nick Foles. I would disagree a little bit because I think Nick Foles is going to want a long-term contract, probably like 3 years maybe at this point. I mean, he's going to be banking on free agency this offseason.
Yeah.
If I'm this team, I'm taking a flyer on someone like Teddy Bridgewater or Ryan Tannehill. Possibilities of a possible 1-year contract with these guys who maybe try to prove themselves again. That's just my opinion. I think they should go after some of the those guys who aren't looking for long-term contracts. Because if you're getting Alex Smith back, I mean, they signed him to a 4-year deal last year. I mean, you can't have 2 big contracts for quarterbacks.
Mm-hmm. I agree with the Teddy Bridgewater part of 1-year deal because I honestly believe that they draft a quarterback. A lot of people have Daniel Jones going at this pick. They just want a bridge quarterback. You just want a guy who 1 year can go over and you can start anew. This team does have a few needs. Their safeties are kind of weak. Plus, you're losing Clinton Dix, who they traded for. Cornerback, you could really use one opposite Josh Norman. Fabian Monroe is decent, but I would like someone better. Like James said, Doxson, he's been decent, and I'm a TCU fan, so I'm really rooting for this guy. But he hasn't shown that he is a number 1 wide receiver yet, so getting a true number 1 would be huge.
Well, that's what team's been rumored to possibly go out, and I have them actually trading for Antonio Brown this offseason. Now, I know it sounds weird, the Redskins of all teams, but honestly, Antonio Brown might consider this a contender. I mean, they were 6-3 before getting that injury at quarterback. This team, I mean, like you said, Doxson's been decent, but they're losing Jamison Crowder this offseason as well. They really need to improve on the wide receiver position. Why not trade for Antonio Brown?
Yeah, that'd be very good.
One of the most disappointing guys they got was Paul Richardson, who I thought was going to be really.
He was
good
decent, but he did get hurt. So,
yeah, he got hurt. When he came in, everybody was like, they got their number 1 guy. He looked good in Seattle.
Got like a 5-year contract.
Yeah, they were very excited with the fact they were going to have Doxson and Paul Richardson. And I just feel like he didn't live up to the hype. He had injuries. When he was on the field, he had a few drops. So for me, I would like them to go out, and if they got Antonio Brown, that'd be huge. Yeah. That'd be insane. But I'm just saying, even a small one, go grab a Adam Humphries. Go grab Cole Beasley. Go draft someone. Just get a few more weapons for this team because you have weapons on this team.
And I know this team was only 7-9, but they've got to play this offseason like they're winning it now.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, go after vets. Not long-term contracts. Get guys who have playoff experience. I mean, I would even go after maybe some guys who were on the Patriots these last couple of years, even if they didn't have big roles. They're just guys who can come into the building and give you, experience and just the mentality of we need to get to the playoffs this year.
I think an Amendola would be a good fit there.
Right, that's what possibly. I'm saying. I mean, they're losing. And another thing I would bring back, if they don't draft the quarterback, maybe bring back Josh Johnson on a 1-year deal. Again, he did well with their team last year with what he had.
Yep.
So maybe bringing him back. What do you guys think about? Are you guys done with that kind of topic or?
Yeah.
What do you guys think about HaHa Clinton Dix? Like, do you think they bring him back or what?
I think they will, because if you give up a 4th-round pick, I don't think you're trying to keep a guy for maybe it was 10 games or whatever it was. If you give up that much draft capital, I think you're going to re-sign him. As a Packers fan, I'd be very hesitant in giving him big money because, yes, he has proven that he's a good ball hawk, but his tackling is god-awful. It's god-awful. So it's a very risky signing for them.
I don't think HaHa will ask for too much money. I think he's going to be on the middle ground for safeties. Like Earl Thomas and Landon Collins, they're going to be the ones who go out and get the big money. I think like an Adrian Amos and a HaHa Clinton Dix are going to be more of like the mid-range type guys. One of the things I do want to talk about though, moving on, would be the Redskins O-line is something that was a huge question mark this year. They allowed a lot of QB pressures, a lot of QB hits, a lot of sacks. It's definitely something that they need to address this offseason. And as we said before, this free agency is pretty good with offensive linemen. So is this draft. Other than D linemen, O linemen is probably the next deepest part of this draft. So again, it's another part that I would like the Redskins to go and address.
And Brandon Sheriff had a big injury this year, didn't he?
He was one. Yeah, they had a lot of rotations of offensive linemen. They lost Trent Williams too, their bookend left tackle. And it was just, a lot of subbing. Didn't they have Jonathan Cooper at the end?
They did, yeah.
Yeah, so.
The guy who goes everywhere.
Yeah, he might have been on every team in the NFL by now. Jeez.
But, so basically that was the Redskins season. It was a lot of injuries, a lot of promise for next season if they can stay healthy. So we'll move on to the second team. This team made the playoffs, actually. The Eagles. 9-7. They squeaked into the playoffs. A lot of people halfway through the season, week 11, when they were 4-6, were like Super Bowl hangover. They're just like the Panthers after Panthers lost their Super Bowl and the Eagles won theirs. But everybody was saying Super Bowl hangover. These aren't making it. And then they went 5-1 after that, beating the Rams and the Texans, 2 really big games, and made the playoffs. And they won a playoff game. It was off the double doink, but they won a playoff game. Yeah. They did go on to lose to the Saints after that, but for me, I feel like this was a good season for the Eagles. Off losing Carson Wentz, what was it? Do you remember what week it was? They lost him to the back injury.
I thought it was after the Cowboys game, which was around week 10 or 11.
Well, they lost Carson Wentz again. They went to Nick Foles, the magic of Foles.
Yeah.
He won them another playoff game. Couldn't continue it this time.
But I was going to say a very winnable game against the Saints. I mean, Alshon didn't drop that, so
the Foles magic was there.
Once again,
I would definitely say this was a good season for the Eagles. I know a lot of them wanted a back-to-back Super Bowl, but I mean everybody wants a back-to-back Super Bowl after 1 year. So, for me, this was a good season for the Eagles. Mostly seeing as you were 4-6, ended up making the playoffs and winning a playoff game. That's pretty huge. So I'm actually going to talk about one of the bigger parts of their season, which was October 30th. They went out and traded a third for Golden Tate. Did you guys like this trade?
I thought it was a good trade, but I think they might have given up a little too much. A third-round pick, that's a big price, and especially with him being an upcoming free agent, and there's already signs pointing to him not going back there. That's kind of tough to swallow as an Eagles or for an Eagles fan. So
we talk about the best view is the best sight is hindsight.
Yeah.
At the time, I really liked this deal because Again, a third-round pick for a guy who had really done good at the first half of the season with the Detroit Lions. The Eagles, they lost Mike Wallace to injury. Alshon Jeffrey was, he was okay. But, adding another receiver is always good if you want to make the playoffs. And at the time, I was like, third-round pick, yeah, I mean, it's a little high, and I know how much teams value picks nowadays. But to get a guy in Golden Tate who's really had a successful career both for the Seahawks and the Detroit Lions, I really like this deal. And now I'm looking at it. If he leaves in free agency, you already lose a third-round pick, and it is interesting to kind of look at it and say, does this trade work for them? Especially because he did win the game for them against the Chicago Bears, basically because you didn't know about the field goal was going to happen, but he got them to go ahead late in the game with that touchdown. But then they lost to the Saints, as we said, and they didn't make it to the Super Bowl, which is what they wanted. But again, I do like the trade. I still think at the time it was a good trade for them to make. So
I agree. It was a good trade at the time. Looking forward, since they didn't win the Super Bowl. If they don't re-sign him, for me, it's not a. It was only okay. If they don't re-sign him, right, it's only an okay deal. If they do re-sign him, it's a great deal. You get a third for a very good wide receiver. Moving on, I'm going to go to some of their needs for this offseason, and it's because they are losing a few people because they don't,
actually a lot of guys.
Yeah, they don't have much cap space. Ryan, you said they were in the negatives, right?
So they're actually $11.5 million over the cap right now, according to what's over the cap, I think, is the actual site name. So, I mean, they've definitely got to cut a lot of players. I've got the list. Did you have the list? Or?
I don't. I just have the free agents. Golden Tate. Nick Foles bought his freedom. Jay Ajayi, Brandon Graham, Hagoli Nagata, Ronald Darby, Darren Sproles, Corey Graham. Like, that's a lot of people who are
a lot of key players on that team.
Mike Wallace, Jordan Matthews. That's a lot of key players right there. And for being over the cap, do you think we might see some cuts possibly?
So, yeah, I guess I'll start here for this one. I've got, and they're going to be controversial cuts, but when you're $11.5 million over the cap and you have guys that you must re-sign, you've got guys you maybe don't want to cut but need to. Jason Peters, again, he's older. He's been there for a long time, though, left tackle. He's, if you cut him, not too much, but $2.7 million, and everything counts when it comes to this. Nelson Aguilar, okay, that's a big one for me, but again, you cut him and no dead cap for any of these guys. If you cut him, $9.4 million in cap, okay? Then Michael Bennett, the guy who they traded for, again, he was okay for them this season, but again, no dead cap, and they get $7 million in cap back. And the last one I have is Stefan Wisniewski. I don't know how to pronounce it, but he's an offensive lineman. You get $3 million from him. So by cutting these players, these are really just the key players I talk about that I think they should cut. There's obviously other players that you'll see them cut, but these are really the big names. And if they can do that, they're going to have to, they'll free up some cap.
So if they don't end up cutting these players and they let these guys, say they let these key guys go, do you think they can replace these needs through the draft?
Possibly. Especially without a third-round pick, that's going to make it very tough for them. First round, I think first round they're going to go running back, possibly Josh Jacobs. And then second round, if they grab a receiver or a defensive back, that's all right. But then you have to wait a whole round to the fourth. I think a really underrating signing would be to bring back Jordan Matthews. He came over from the Patriots after they cut him due to an injury. And him and Wentz have had a lot. They have really good chemistry together. I mean, they've been together since their rookie year. That was one of his better years in the league. He had like 8 touchdowns, I believe.
He did leave for the Patriots and Bills, like in between.
They traded him.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
they traded him.
Yeah.
So I think it'd be a really good signing to bring him back and have him as like your 2 or 3. So.
Well, because I'm looking at it here, and you're losing. You're obviously going to lose Nick Foles. That one's obvious.
Mm-hmm.
He's already said he wants to go start somewhere else. Golden Tate's another one you'll probably lose. Brandon Graham said that he owes it to himself to go look other places, which to me is kind of him saying he wants to go somewhere else. Hagoli Nagata, I guess, isn't too big of a loss. He's kind of getting older. Mm-hmm. Jordan Hicks is another one who I didn't say before, I don't believe, but I like Jordan Hicks. So that's a big middle linebacker you're losing. And then Ronald Darby, who's kind of their best corner.
Yeah.
I mean, some people will say Jalen Mills, but for me, Ronald Darby's your best corner. You lose him. Jalen Mills. You got Sidney Jones, who hasn't ever really lived up to his hype so far.
Yeah.
Cravon LeBanc. So, I mean...
Maddox.
Maddox.
For me, there's 3 guys they must re-sign, and one of them's not too big, but I got Brandon Graham, Jordan Hicks. Those are 2, like, really big must re-signs. And then Jake Elliott, I think, is another must resign. But he's not going to take up too much cap room. He's a very solid kicker for them. And as we've seen time and time again, kickers, for whatever reason, I mean, there's only somewhat good ones, and then there's a lot of really just average to bad ones now. And then for me, there's also 2 try to resigns. They aren't must resigns, but try to get Golden Tate back and you see what he wants for contract, and then also try to get Ronald Darby back.
Yeah, I like Darby for me would be kind of a priority. Just because I think he is a very good corner in this league, and for how kind of thin your corners are, it'd be nice to get Darby back and have Darby and Mills as your 2 starting corners. So do you guys have anything else on the Eagles?
Just there's a lot of free agents, and they're obviously not going to be able to re-sign all of them, but try your best if you're the Eagles. I mean, if you want to stay relevant, I mean, do your best.
I do believe that, actually I will say this is the last thing I'm going to say, is I agree with James. I think they will draft Josh Jacobs, running back out of Alabama. That's who I believe they take first round. And then second round, I do believe if they lose Darby, they come back and take a corner. That is my opinion. That's who I believe they will replace those guys with. But if the Eagles get Josh Jacobs, 1, for fantasy, I think that's amazing. But 2, for the league, I believe Josh Jacobs is going to be one of the better running backs in this league, behind a very good O-line and with the Eagles. Carson Wentz is a really good quarterback. Watch out for Josh Jacobs if this actually does, if this pairing actually happens.
Right.
So we'll move on to the team that won this division. And at the start of the season, you weren't even thinking this team was going to win. They were 3-5 and ended up going 7-1 to finish the year. The Dallas Cowboys. They went 10-6. They made at the time, a controversial trade. A lot of people actually shit on this team for doing this trade. And it turned out to be amazing. It turned out to actually really help this team. They got Amari Cooper October 22nd. They traded the first for him, and that was the big thing, was that they traded the first for Amari, and everybody said that they overpaid that, and it was a terrible trade, in which at the time I could see why, because their pick was pretty high up at the time.
And he wasn't having a great first half of the season.
Yeah. So. But once he came over to Dallas, he did awesome. So I want to know, how do you guys feel about that trade?
Now it's a great trade. Looking back at it, at that time, I was not a fan of it. I've never been a big fan of Amari Cooper. I mean, he showed a lot of flash, but he's been extremely inconsistent throughout his career. So when the news broke on that, I thought the Raiders fleeced them. Looking back at it now, I really like that trade. Now the Dallas pick, I believe, is 27, 28. So it's not like a very high up pick where you can get a really good impact player. So I think it's a very good trade.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with James. At the time, I was kind of skeptical of it. But now I look at it, and what pick we thought, 27?
27 is what they got.
Now we look at it, is there a better player at 27 than Amari Cooper? And I don't think there is going to be. So obviously you don't know when they're drafted how they're going to turn out. But obviously right now we can't think that person will be. So for me right now, obviously the Cowboys got the better of that deal. And, they filled a hole at wide receiver with, where they had Michael Gallup and Cole Beasley. And Terrence Williams got injured. So really just they filled a big need at wide receiver.
So, even though they got Amari Cooper, I still think that this offseason they probably should still add another wide receiver.
Oh, for sure.
Cole Beasley is a free agent this offseason. I think that they should probably add a good number 2 opposite Amari Cooper. I love Michael Gallup. He was my favorite wide receiver last year in that draft. Everybody around here will tell you I love this guy. I loved him in college. I think he can be a really good 3 in the NFL, but you need a 2. I'm actually going to let you guys talk on the Cowboys for a little bit. What do you think their offseason needs?
I think they should definitely focus on the offensive side of the ball, especially at wide receiver and tight end. And I'm going to say something about their defense. Cowboys fans might hate me for this, but I think you should cut Sean Lee. And a big reason for that is he was playing a lot, and so Leighton Vander Esch was on the bench. And that guy, he's an amazing player at Boise State. I think you need to play him as much as you possibly can. So cut Sean Lee. Yeah, he was a great player, but often
for a long
injured.
time for them too.
Yeah, for a long time, maybe a little too long. But wide receiver, tight end, in the second round, I'm not sure about too many. Or Irv Smith, they could possibly get. Wide receiver, though, I think a Golden Tate or an Adam Humphries would be good to kind of replace that Cole Beasley because he's already talked about leaving. Tight end, maybe like a Tyler Eifert, something like that, who you can get on a low-risk deal because he's coming off an injury. But definitely focus on the offensive side of the ball, that's for sure.
I do like that Golden Tate fit there. I think that would be actually, you got a veteran in there, a guy who's been around the league for a long time, and someone who's been in key moments before.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I do like that. And Dak, honestly, I think he does need, really good weapons to thrive in that offense.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I liked Dak last season. A lot of people were again shitting on him for having a bad season. He didn't have that bad of a season.
You talking this season? People said he had a bad season.
This season,
really?
people were saying.
Well, at the start, he was pretty bad.
People were like, he made the Pro Bowl this year. Yes, off of someone dropping out, but he made it. And a lot of people were like, "Well, why did he make it? He threw 22 touchdowns and rushed in another 5." He actually had a pretty good season. Brought his team to the playoffs. I don't think Dak deserves a lot of the hate he gets, because I actually think he's a decent quarterback. His accuracy is off at times, but he makes up for it with his athletic running ability. Not only that, but I think when he has Zeke fully healthy, them two together is a very dynamic duo. Due to the fact that Dak is a good runner, it gives you that good play action. It gives you that good option run. For me, Zeke was the leading rusher this year.
Leading
right?
rusher, yep.
So it just shows you that this Dallas team has a lot of promise for years to come with that core right there. And I believe if you add like a Golden Tate or an Adam Humphries this offseason with Amari Cooper, with the O-line that they have, with their defense that looks pretty good, Jalen Smith, Leighton Van Der Esch, this team could be good for a few years to come.
The other thing I want to say, I'm going to reposition myself here, just to kind of put it out there for Dak haters. Go watch that film on Dak Prescott versus Seattle in the playoffs. How many game-changing plays he had in that game, and how many there was a drive at the very end of the game where the game was on the line, and there was like a 4th and long or something, and he ran the ball for the first down, taking a big hit at the very end of the play, but he got that first down knowing he had to go out and win the game. He had to be the guy to win the game for them. He had a fantastic game against Seattle, and a game that most people said, can Dak play in a playoff game? Can he go out there in front of a huge fan base of the Dallas Cowboys and get the job done? And he shut all the haters up. So if you still hate him, I beg you to go out there and rewatch that film.
And a big thing I want to say is, like, Dak, if you watch him, he's not that bad. Like, in his playoff games, the one against Aaron Rodgers and the Packers, he didn't lose that game. Rodgers is just a great quarterback and won that game. Against the Rams this year when they lost, he just lost to a very good offense. But he put up 22 points.
Yeah.
Like, he does enough to win games. He's a good quarterback. I just don't think he deserves the hate that he gets. I do want to talk about one of the bigger moments of this team's year, which was the Saints win, or the win against the Saints 13-10.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody, even the biggest one, Stephen A. Smith, who hates the Cowboys, was basically trashing the Cowboys all week, saying that they were going to get thrashed. They came out and won this game. How big do you think this win was for them this year?
Oh, it was huge. It completely turned their season around. They went from a team that everyone was, like you were saying, thought they were garbage to, wow, this defense is one of the best in the NFL. And, they really carried that momentum throughout the season. Their only other loss in the regular season was against the Colts, which
was a respectable loss. I mean, they were on fire.
They got blown out, but the Cowboys didn't need to win that game for anything. It kind of meant nothing. It was at the end of the season. They already had the division locked up. So, I mean, I don't really look too much into that, but that win completely turned their season around and shocked everybody watching it.
So, do you guys have anything else on the Cowboys?
Well, I think we're missing the big thing, DeMarcus Lawrence. I mean, I think that's a big topic. I mean, do they tag him, or do you think they re-sign him? I mean, what do you think is going to go up with
I don't
him?
think they can tag. Well, they can tag him, but they can't tag him in the fact that he said he will not play for them if they do tag him. So if they tag him, basically the only reason they would be tagging him was to hopefully work a long deal out with him, or he's going to Le'Veon Bell and sit out the season. He's already said that. He will not sign another franchise tag. So for Dallas, the smart thing to do would be to try to work out an extension with him, but they definitely need to re-sign this guy. He is a wrecking ball.
I'm just going to let Jerry Jones know. Be careful. Don't offer Dak too much money. I know that it was an interview. He said that he's not going to pull the Tom Brady move and take a team-friendly deal. But this year, the top 5 highest paid quarterbacks in the league did not make the playoffs. Neither of them. That's including guys like Aaron Rodgers. In my opinion, I think he should take a deal probably around $20 million, give or take a few million, so they can re-sign guys like DeMarcus Lawrence and all that.
That's a good point. I believe that they will end up overspending. They won't want to go out and look for a QB again, so they probably will end up spending about $25 million probably. But you guys have anything else? No? All right, so we're going to end the episode here. So that was the NFC East Division in review. We'll be doing these for every single division. And anything else? No?
No.
All right. Have a good one.
Peace.
Doses.